That hook is already very strong. I'll tighten it slightly for pacing, clarity, and 30 to 60-second retention optimization while keeping your tone intact.
Hook.
I came home from the hospital on a Thursday afternoon. 4 days of 4 antibiotics, bad sleep, and that quiet kind of loneliness you get when you're unwell somewhere that isn't yours. My mom had told me there would be people at the house, that they'd gathered for my birthday while I was in. Just something small, she said, so you don't feel like you missed it. I remember lying in that hospital bed, actually feeling grateful, like I was being thought about, like I mattered even when I wasn't there. I walked through the front door with my bag, still on my shoulder. The decorations were still up, glasses on the counter, photos on my mom's phone, the remains of a party I hadn't been part of. And within an hour of being home, before I'd even changed out of my hospital clothes, I started to understand something I wasn't supposed to notice. The party they threw in my name while I was scared and alone in that hospital bed hadn't really been for me at all. But to understand why that moment changed how I saw my family completely, you need to understand the role I had always played in it. I've always been the kind of person people describe as easy, not in a dismissive way, more like dependable, the one who remembers things,
Who checks in.
who keeps track of birthdays and plans and how everyone is doing,
Without being asked.
It wasn't something I decided to be. It just became the role I fit into, especially in my family. My sister Diana was always the one people noticed first, not because she demanded it, just because she stood out. She was sharp, driven, the kind of person who moved through things with a clear direction.
School.
University, work, everything lined up in a way that made sense, that people could point to, be proud of. And they were, openly, constantly. My parents talked about her achievements the way people talk about weather, naturally, without thinking. She's done so well. This is such a big step. We're so proud of her. And I was proud of her too. That was never the problem. But somewhere in all of that, I became something quieter, less visible, not overlooked exactly, just steady, the one who didn't need much, the one who was doing fine. And that was always enough, at least on the surface. I had a good life, a flat I liked, a job in HR that I actually cared about, friends who knew me properly, not just the version of me my family saw. Nothing about my life felt lacking, which made it easy to ignore the smaller things, the moments that didn't quite land right, because they weren't big enough to challenge, just noticeable. If you paid attention, and I usually didn't, not fully, because it was easier to let things be what they were. My birthday had always been low-key, not forgotten, never that, just simple, a dinner, a cake, something small at home, nothing that required much effort or planning, and I was fine with that. I told myself I preferred it that way, which was true, mostly. This year was different, not because of the birthday itself, but because of where I was when it happened. The infection started as something small, something I ignored longer than I should have. Work had been busy, long days,
Short nights.
and I told myself I'd deal with it when things slowed down.
They didn't.
Instead, it got worse,
Quickly.
to the point where I didn't really have a choice anymore. I went to A&E expecting antibiotics and a few hours of waiting. What I got was admission, tests, for lines, a bed in a ward that didn't feel like it belonged to me. Just a few days, they said. But even a few days feels different when you're not prepared for it, when you didn't plan to be there, when your body feels like something you don't fully trust. My birthday fell on the 3rd day. I remember waking up that morning, still tired, still not quite right, and checking my phone. Messages from friends. Simple, kind, exactly what I needed. My mom called later that afternoon. Her voice was warm, comforting. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Better," I said. Not completely true. but easier than explaining. We're doing something small at the house tonight, she said. For your birthday? I smiled,
even though she couldn't see it.
You don't have to do that, I said. I meant it. I wasn't thinking about celebrations. I was thinking about getting home, about feeling normal again.
It's just a few people, she said.
Nothing big, just so it doesn't feel like it's passed without anything. That landed softly, in the way things do, when you're not in a place you want to be. The idea that something was happening for me, even if I wasn't there, even if it was small, it felt thoughtful. Thank you, I said. And I meant that too. I hung up feeling lighter than I had all day, like there was something waiting for me outside of that room. Something familiar. Something mine. I imagined it without really trying to. A few relatives. Maybe some close family friends.
A cake.
A couple of photos. Nothing loud. Nothing overwhelming. Just something that said I hadn't been forgotten. The evening passed quietly. Nurses moving in and out. The low hum of the ward. People around me dealing with their own things. And every now and then, I thought about the house. About what it looked like. Who was there. What they were saying. It didn't feel like I was missing something. It felt like something was being held for me. Waiting. And that made it easier to be where I was. The next day blurred into the one after. Time moves differently in hospital.
Slower.
Less defined. Until finally on the fourth day, they said I could go home. I packed my things slowly. Not rushing. Still a little unsteady. Still not quite myself. But ready to leave. Ready to be somewhere that felt like mine again. My mom insisted I come to their house first.
Just for a bit, she said.
Until you're properly back on your feet. I didn't argue. It made sense. I didn't feel strong enough to be alone yet. And there was something comforting about going somewhere familiar. Somewhere I had been thinking about for days. So I agreed, picked up my bag, and let myself believe that I was walking back into something that had been waiting for me. The house smelled like something had already happened. Not fresh. Not new. Just settled. Like the air had already held something and moved on. I stepped inside slowly. My bag still on my shoulder. Shoes still on. Not fully back in my body yet. My mom came in from the kitchen. Smiled when she saw me. Oh, good, you're home, she said. Came over. Kissed my cheek. Careful not to hold me too tightly. Like I was still fragile. How are you feeling, she asked. Better, I said. Again. Easier than explaining. My dad was in the living room. Looked up. Nodded. All right, he said. Yeah, I replied. Normal. Everything felt normal. At least on the surface. But as I stood there a little longer, I started noticing things. The decorations. Still up. Balloons tied loosely to chairs. A banner across the wall. Slightly crooked now. Like it had been put up carefully and then left. Glasses on the counter. Not washed. Plates stacked unevenly. The kind of mess that comes after people leave. Not during. After. You didn't have to leave all this up, I said.
Light.
Half a smile. Trying to place myself into it. We were tired last night, my mom said. Thought we'd deal with it today. Last night. That word landed quietly. Because that meant everything had already happened.
Completely.
Finished. I walked further into the room.
Slowly.
Taking it in. Not overwhelmed. Just observing. There were photos on the side. My mom's phone left face up on the table. The screen still on. A picture paused mid-scroll. I didn't pick it up right away. Just looked at it from where I stood. People grouped together. Smiling. Glasses raised. And for a second, it felt exactly like what I had imagined. Familiar faces.
Warm.
Comfortable. Then I stepped closer. Picked up the phone. Scrolled once. Then again. And something shifted. Not dramatically. Just slightly. There were more people than I expected. Not a few. Not small. A full room. Relatives I hadn't seen in months. People who wouldn't usually come for something quiet. I scrolled again. Another photo. Same group. Different angle. And in the middle of it, Diana, standing slightly forward, glass in her hand, smiling in a way that looked focused, like attention was already on her. I paused, looked at it a little longer, then scrolled again. Another photo. My mom next to her. My dad on the other side. All of them facing inward, toward Diana. Not outward. Not casually grouped. Positioned, like something had just been said, or was about to be. Did you have a lot of people here? I asked. Still casual. Still light. My mom didn't turn around right away. Just kept rinsing something in the sink. A few, she said. People wanted to come by. People wanted to come by. I repeated that in my head, because it didn't quite match what I was looking at. I kept scrolling. Slowly. Not searching for anything specific. Just noticing. Then I saw the cake. White. Simple. My name written across it. Clean. Centered. But the photo wasn't of the cake alone. It was mid-moment. People gathered. Phones out. And Diana again standing at the center. Not beside it. Not off to the side. At it. And that was the first moment something didn't line up properly. Not wrong. Just slightly out of place. Did you do anything after the cake? I asked. I don't know why I asked that. Something about the photos, the way they were spaced, suggested more. My mom turned slightly this time. Dried her hands. Just a few drinks, she said. Nothing major. Nothing major. That phrase again. I nodded. Set the phone back down. Walked over to sit down. Because my body was starting to feel tired again. Not from anything specific. Just the weight of being back. Of trying to catch up to something I hadn't been part of. My dad glanced at me. You all right? He asked. Yeah, I said. And I meant it. Mostly. Because nothing had happened yet. Not clearly. Just small things that didn't quite sit properly. And I wasn't someone who jumped to conclusions. I let things settle. Take shape. Become clear on their own. So I sat there, listening to them talk about small things. The evening. Who came. Who left early. Normal details. But every time they mentioned someone, it felt slightly off. Like the list was longer than it should have been. Like the energy of it didn't match what I had been told. And I didn't interrupt. Didn't question it directly. Because something in me had already started doing something else. Not reacting. Just paying attention. Because sometimes the truth doesn't come from what people say. It comes from what doesn't quite match. And I could feel that gap starting to widen. I just didn't know exactly what was on the other side of it yet. I didn't say anything straight away. Not after the photos. Not after the conversation. I just sat with it. Because nothing I had seen was obvious enough on its own. It was just slightly off. And I've learned that when something feels slightly off, it usually means there's more underneath it. It just hasn't shown itself properly yet. My cousin Rachel arrived about an hour later. She didn't know I was back. Walked in mid-sentence, talking about something from the night before. Then stopped when she saw me. Oh, I didn't know you were home, she said. Came over. Careful hug. How are you feeling? Better, I said. Again. It was becoming automatic. She sat down beside me, still holding her phone, still half in whatever conversation she had been having before she walked in. That was such a good night, she said, looking toward my mum. Honestly, Diana deserved it. And that was the first moment it landed properly. Not fully, but enough. I turned slightly toward her. What do you mean? I asked, still calm, still even. She didn't hesitate. Didn't realize she needed to. The party, she said. For her promotion. And just like that, everything shifted into place. Not slowly. Not piece by piece. All at once. I felt it settle. Clear. Complete. The photos. The people. The way Diana stood in the center. The way my mum described it. The way nothing quite matched what I had been told. It all aligned. I didn't react immediately. I didn't interrupt. I just let her keep talking. Because once something starts to reveal itself, you don't stop it halfway. You should have seen the speeches, she said, smiling slightly. They were so proud. Speeches. I felt that word more than anything else, not because of what it meant, but because of what it confirmed. This wasn't casual. This wasn't something small. This had structure, focus, attention. Speeches? I repeated. Quietly. She nodded. Your dad said a few things, she said. Then your mum. She glanced at me briefly, still not fully registering. And then everyone raised a glass to Diana. A glass to Diana. Not shared. Not combined. Directed. I felt something go very still inside me. Not sharp. Not overwhelming. Just settled. And for me? I asked. It came out softer than I expected. Not emotional. Just specific. Rachel paused then. Just for a second. The first sign she realized something might not be landing the way she thought. Oh, yeah, of course, she said quickly. There is a toast for you too. A toast. I nodded slightly. And then? I asked, because I needed to hear it fully. Not assume. Not fill in the gaps. She hesitated. Just a fraction. And then we moved on, she said. And that was it. That was the part that landed hardest. Not because it was surprising, but because it was clear. My birthday had been acknowledged. Briefly. Then set aside. Like something that needed to be covered. Before the real reason everyone was there could continue. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Hands resting in my lap. Breathing steady. Because now there was nothing left to figure out. No missing pieces. No confusion. Just the full shape of it. My mum spoke from the kitchen.
Light.
Careful. Rachel, do you want some tea? Redirecting.
Softening.
Moving things away from where they had landed. Rachel stood up. Yes, please, she said. Grateful for the shift. And just like that, the conversation moved on. But it didn't move for me. I stayed exactly where I was. Sitting in the middle of a room that suddenly felt different. Not unfamiliar. Just redefined. Because this wasn't about the party. Not really. It was about what it showed. Something that had always been there. Just clearer now. My birthday had been the reason. The explanation. The acceptable framing. But it hadn't been the focus. I hadn't been the focus. And the part that stayed with me wasn't that it happened. It was how easily it happened. How naturally everyone moved through it. How no one stopped and said, this doesn't feel right. Not my parents. Not Diana. No one. Because for them it made sense. It was efficient. Convenient. Two things at once. And I was the one who could absorb that. The one who wouldn't mind. The one who would understand. Because I always had. I sat there for a long time after that. Not speaking. Not reacting. Just letting it settle properly. Because once something becomes clear in that way, you don't unsee it. You don't soften it. You don't adjust it back into something comfortable. You just recognize it. And decide what you're going to do with it. Be honest, if you were sitting there hearing that, would you have said anything or just let it sit like I did? I didn't confront anyone that evening. Not my mum. Not my dad. Not even Diana. Even though she came in later. Still carrying that same energy I had seen in the photos.
Bright.
Focused. Unaware. Or maybe just uninterested in noticing. She hugged me. Careful.
Light.
Asked how I was feeling. I said better. She said good. And that was it. No mention of the party. No acknowledgement of what it had been. Or what it hadn't. And I didn't bring it up. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew that moment wasn't the right place for it.
Not yet.
Because I wasn't angry in the way that creates noise. I was something else. Quieter. More precise. The kind of quiet that comes when something finally makes sense. Later that night, I went to the spare room, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and let everything settle properly. Not just the party, not just what Rachel said, but all the smaller moments that had felt slightly off over the years. The dinners where conversations drifted toward Diana. The celebrations that grew larger when they were hers. The way my own things were always enough, but never the center. None of it had felt wrong on its own. Just consistent. And now this. This was just the clearest version of it. I lay back slowly, stared at the ceiling, and asked myself something simple. Not what they did. Not why they did it. Just, what do I actually want from this? Because I couldn't undo the party. I couldn't make them see it the way I did just by explaining it. And I wasn't interested in arguing about something they already believed made sense. So the question wasn't how to prove anything. It was what I was going to do differently. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I felt better, just because my mind was already clear.
Not spinning.
Not replaying. Just settled into something new. I got up slowly, walked into the kitchen. My mum was already there, making tea. Same as always. She looked up when I came in. "Did you sleep all right?" she asked. "I did," I said. And I meant that. Because clarity lets you rest in a way confusion doesn't. I sat down across from her. Didn't rush into anything. Just let the moment exist for a second. Then I said, "The party wasn't really for me, was it?" No accusation. No edge. Just a question that didn't leave much space to move around. She paused.
Just slightly. Cup in her hand.
Eyes on the counter. "It was for both of you," she said. Careful. Measured. The version she had already decided was true. "It wasn't," I replied. Still calm. Still even. She looked at me then. Really looked. Like she was trying to understand what had changed. "It was your birthday," she said. As well. That addition. That qualifier. That was the part she didn't hear.
Or didn't want to.
"It was mostly about Diana," I said. And I let that sit. Because it didn't need to be argued. It just needed to be acknowledged. She exhaled quietly.
Set the cup down.
"We thought it would be nice to do both," she said. There were people already coming because of her news. And there it was. Not denial. Not confusion. Just justification. Efficient. Practical. Reasonable. At least to her. I nodded once. Not agreeing. Just taking it in. "You didn't think I might want my own day?" I asked. She didn't answer straight away. Because that question didn't have a practical response. It had an honest one. And those are harder. "You weren't even here," she said finally. "And you wouldn't have enjoyed it anyway." That sentence landed differently. Not sharp. Just revealing. Because it wasn't about me at all. Not really.
It was about what made sense for them.
What worked. What fit. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Hands resting in my lap. Breathing steady. "I would have liked it to be mine," I said. And that was the first time I said something that wasn't softened. Not loud. Not emotional. Just true. She looked at me for a long moment. Like she was trying to place that version of me somewhere familiar. And couldn't quite do it. Because I had never said something like that before. Not without adjusting it. Not without making it easier for her to accept.
But I wasn't doing that now.
The conversation didn't escalate. It didn't resolve either. It just shifted. Because something had been said that couldn't be folded back into how things used to be. And that was enough. I stood up after a minute. Not abruptly. Just finished. "I'm going back to my flat later," I said. "I'm fine now." She nodded. A little slower than usual. "All right," she said. And there was something in her tone I hadn't heard before. Not agreement. Not understanding. Just awareness. Because for the first time, I wasn't absorbing something quietly. I was placing it where it actually belonged. And once you do that, Everything else has to move around it. I did go back to my flat that afternoon.
Slowly. Still a little tired.
Still not fully myself physically, but clear in a way I hadn't been before. My overnight bag felt heavier than it should have. Probably because it still held the hospital in it, the discharge papers, the smell of antiseptic on my clothes. That strange sense of having been somewhere suspended from your actual life. And then walking back into it to find something had shifted while you were away. My flat was exactly how I left it. Quiet, orderly. My blanket still folded over the arm of the sofa. A glass in the sink. Shoes by the door. Nothing dramatic. Nothing changed. And somehow that made the contrast sharper. Because in my own space, I could finally feel what had actually happened without anyone else's version sitting on top of it. I made tea, sat on the sofa, and looked at my phone for a long time without really using it. Messages from friends, a few work emails, a check-in from one of my closest friends asking if I was home yet. Normal things, ordinary things, the kind that should have made the day feel settled. But underneath all of it, I kept coming back to the same thing. Not the party itself, not even the speeches, just the ease of it. The way everyone had moved through something that should have felt wrong and called it reasonable. That was the part one couldn't stop thinking about. Because it meant this wasn't an accident.
Not really. It was instinct.
Family instinct. The kind that forms over years and stops feeling like a decision at all. Diana had good news. I was in hospital. There was already a reason to gather. So my birthday became the frame. Useful, convenient, respectable enough that no one had to question it. And I was the kind of daughter who would understand. That was the assumption underneath everything. That I would understand. That I would be touched. Grateful. Easy. And for most of my life, I had been. That evening, Diana called. Her name came up on my screen, and I just looked at it for a second. Not because I didn't want to answer. Because I wanted to hear how she was going to speak to me now. I answered on the third ring.
Hey, she said.
Her tone was careful. Not guilty. Just aware. Hey.
A pause.
Small. Measured. How are you feeling? She asked. Better, I said. Then waited. Because I wasn't going to help her get to the point.
She got there anyway.
Mom said you were upset about the party. Upset about the party. Even that phrasing told me something. Not hurt. Not disappointed. Not that something had been taken or shifted. Just upset. As if the issue was my reaction. Not what had actually happened. I'm not upset about a party, I said. I kept my voice even. I'm upset that my birthday became the excuse for celebrating you while I was in hospital. Silence. Longer this time. Then, I didn't ask for that, she said. And I believed her. That wasn't the hard part. I believed she hadn't orchestrated it. That she hadn't sat there designing something cruel. But that wasn't the same as innocence. No, I said. You didn't. Another pause. But you didn't question it either. That landed. I could feel it in the silence that followed. Because that was the real thing between us. Not active harm. Passive acceptance. The kind that looks harmless from the inside because it asks nothing difficult of you. I didn't think, she started, then stopped. And for a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Not because she had been wronged. Because she was only just reaching the edge of something I had been living inside for years. No, I said quietly. I know you didn't. She exhaled. Not sharply. Just like she was setting something down. I should have called you, she said. It wasn't enough. But it was true. And truth mattered more than polish in that moment. Yes, I said. You should have. We didn't argue after that. There wasn't anything to gain from it. The conversation ended politely. Too politely, maybe. But clear enough that when I put my phone down, I knew something had shifted there too. Not broken. Just changed. Over the next few days, my parents called more than usual. My mom with practical questions that didn't need asking. Had I eaten? Was I resting? Did I need soup brought round? My dad with those brief, awkward check-ins men of his generation seemed to think are subtle enough to hide feeling. All right. Need anything? I answered, kindly, but differently. I didn't fill space for them anymore. Didn't smooth the edges. Didn't perform the version of gratitude they seemed to be waiting for. I just responded to what was actually being offered. No more. At work the following week, one of my colleagues asked if my family had done anything nice for my birthday once I was discharged. And I remember pausing. Not because I didn't know what to say. Because I suddenly realized I no longer wanted to tell the story in a way that protected everyone else. So I said the truth. They threw a party while I was in hospital, and it turned out it was mostly for my sister. She blinked, then said, very simply, "That's awful." And that tiny moment mattered more than I expected. Because there are things you can live around for years when everyone close to you treats them as normal. And then someone outside it hears it once and tells you exactly what it is. That clarity stayed with me. Not to make me angrier, just steadier. So when my mom asked later that week if we were all okay now, I didn't do what I usually did. I didn't say, of course. I didn't say it was fine. I said, no, not really. There was silence on the line. Then my mom said my name in that low warning tone mothers use when they think a conversation is drifting toward unnecessary difficulty. But I didn't step back. I'm not angry, I said. Not in a dramatic way. But I'm not pretending that felt fine, just because it would make everyone more comfortable. And that, more than anything else, was the line. Not loud. Not cruel.
Just impossible to mistake.
Sometimes the biggest thing you change isn't the relationship.
It's what you stop doing inside it.
And once I stopped absorbing things for them, they had no choice but to feel the weight of it themselves. My next birthday didn't arrive suddenly. It came the way most things do, when you're not waiting for them. Quietly. Almost unnoticed at first. Until you realize it's there. A year later. Same date. But everything around it different. Not dramatically. Just clearly. I didn't wait for anyone to ask what I wanted to do. I didn't leave space for something to be arranged around me. I planned it myself. Not in a big way. Not extravagant. Just intentional. I chose a small restaurant I liked. Booked a table. Invited people I didn't have to explain myself to. People who knew me as I actually am. Not just the version I had been inside my family. There were no decorations, no speeches, no structure that could be redirected into something else. Just dinner, conversation, the kind of laughter that doesn't need to be managed. And the entire evening felt steady in a way I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Because nothing about it needed to be negotiated. It was mine.
Completely.
My phone rang that morning. My mom. I let it ring for a second before answering. Not avoiding, just choosing how I stepped into it. Happy birthday, she said. Her voice was softer than it used to be, less certain, like she was aware there was something underneath the call.
Thank you, I said.
There was a pause. Then, what are you doing today? A simple question, but not an empty one, because before it would have been followed by a plan, an assumption, something already decided. I've got dinner with friends, I said.
Clear. Complete.
Another pause.
Different this time.
Not confusion. Just adjustment. That sounds nice, she said. And I could hear it. Not forced. Just careful. We were thinking maybe you could come round this weekend instead. Not tonight. Not inserted into what I had already planned.
Moved.
Shifted. That was new. Yeah, I said. That works. And it did. Because this wasn't about distance. It was about placement. Things sitting where they actually belonged. The call ended simply. No tension. No over-explaining. Just finished. Dinner that evening felt easy. Not in a surface way. In a real one. I didn't have to watch anything. Didn't have to adjust the energy of the room. Didn't have to make space for something else to take over. I was just there, fully. And that was enough. Later that week, I went to my parents' house. Same place, same rooms, nothing physically different. But the feeling of it had shifted. Subtly.
Completely.
My mom hugged me at the door. Held on slightly longer than usual. My dad said happy birthday from the kitchen. Liam nodded from the sofa. Normal, but not the same kind of normal. We had dinner together. Simple. No performance. No attempt to recreate anything. And at one point my mom said, I should have done last year differently. She didn't look at me when she said it, just placed it into the room. And left it there. It wasn't a full apology. Not structured. Not detailed. But it was honest. And that mattered more than anything polished. I know, I said. And that was enough. Because I wasn't looking for something perfect. I was looking for something real. After that, things didn't transform overnight. We didn't become a completely different family. But the shape of things changed. Small adjustments. Repeated over time. That's how it happens. My mom checked herself more. My dad spoke a little sooner. Liam contributed more consistently. Not because I demanded it, because something had shifted into view. And once something is visible, it doesn't disappear again. As for Diana, we found a different way of being with each other. Less automatic, more aware, not distant, just honest in a way we hadn't been before. And that worked, better than what we had. Sometimes I still think about that hospital room, about how I lay there, believing something kind was happening in my name, and how different it turned out to be. But I don't stay in that moment anymore. Because it wasn't the ending of something. It was the point where I stopped misunderstanding what I was part of. And once you see something clearly, you can finally decide where you stand in it. If you've ever felt like you were quietly holding more than your share in a relationship, pay attention to that feeling. It's usually telling you something real. And if stories like this feel familiar to you, you can subscribe for more. There's another one waiting for you right here.